Hey everybody, what's going on? For today's review, we'll be taking you out on a test drive in the all-new 2011 Ford F250 King Ranch Super Duty. The purpose of our test drive today is to demonstrate the overall road manners of the Super Duty in both city and highway driving conditions. Throughout the test drive, we will be discussing many of the performance capabilities of the all-new engine, as well as taking a look at a few of the interior creature comforts that this King Ranch vehicle has to offer. So, now that we have this new information in mind, let's go ahead and start the engine and take you out on a drive. Our test unit today has the extremely rare royal red metallic exterior, combined with the sunset gold metallic underside, combined with the pale adobe and King Ranch red perforated leather interior, let's go ahead and set you guys up and we'll take you out on a drive. Away we go. Now I can certainly tell you that throughout various portions of this test drive our road conditions may not seem to be the best in the world and certainly not the smoothest in the world. And that's not only because the road conditions in this part of the town that we're in are not necessarily the best of condition, but also the fact that, number one, the Super Duty was never meant to be a full-blown road truck. So we'll try to keep it as smooth as we possibly can. Now for today's review, we've selected the King Ranch version of the Ford Super Duty F-Series pickup. Now the reason for this is because, number one, it's the number one most popular F-Series out of the whole Super Duty lineup, and the King Ranch trim is certainly one of the nicest trim levels available for this pickup. But the first thing that the Super Duty was really meant for is pulling power and torque. And the 2011 and now the 2012 Super Duties certainly do not disappoint on any level. For starters, we have an all-new 6.7-liter Power-Stroke turbo diesel V8 up front, put through a 6-speed automatic transmission with the select shift manual shifting. Now when it was first released, the 6.7 turbo diesel V8 put out 390 brake horsepower and 735 pound-feet of torque. Now you would think at that point that is plenty of power for a Super Duty. But as the year has progressed, Ford has now upped the ante. This engine now produces an even 400 brake horsepower and an insane 800 pound-feet of torque. Now, for any full-size Super Duty pickup, that is a heck of a lot of power. Now, if you think the F250 EcoBoost is impressive, the factors that go when you think about the Super Duty are almost unprecedented in terms of a full-size Super Duty pickup. Now, this F250, in its current state, can haul over 22,000 pounds. Now, if modified, and only modified by Ford, might I add, in the correct specifications, like in an F450, which is kind of the commercial version of this pickup, you're able to haul a whopping 24,700 pounds. Now, if you can't haul anything with this, God forbid you need a semi. Seriously. Now, to prove exactly what I'm talking about, for those of you who are fans of the show, there is a show on the History Channel called Top Gear. It's a takeoff, in America at least, of a famous British car review show. Now, Tanner Faust, who is a professional racing driver, took an F250 2011, brand new, was bright silver in fact, and they had been set a challenge to see who could haul or tow the most with their heavy-duty pickup. The three hosts had chosen the main competitors, Dodge, Ford, and Chevrolet. And the Ford ended up, and this is not a joke, and there's footage to prove it. Tanner Faust hooked up the F250 to a fully loaded diesel locomotive. It was a small little switcher engine, but even so, it was attached to a coal car, and that total combined weight was 280,000 pounds, if not a little bit more. Now that is like 10 times the amount of towing that the F250 actually has at 24,700 pounds. But even so, even with the brakes off and everything, the F250 still managed to haul it about 10 feet without breaking down or anything. Now that is probably the truest test of a Super Duty's power that anyone, including myself, has ever seen. So now for a little bit about the review unit we've selected today. Like I said before, this is the King Ranch version, and the King Ranch is essentially a very luxury, yet somewhat, well, basically it's a luxury pickup truck. Now really, luxury and pickups don't normally go together, especially when you're talking as heavy a grade as this. But instead, even though the truck was meant to work and meant to haul heavy, heavy loads, Ford still wants you to have a little bit of luxury amenities. For example, we've got this very nice, soft King Ranch red leather, which is a signature staple of any King Ranch F-150, F-250, or F-350. And even so, they've even applied the package to the Ford Expedition. Now, when I said luxury, I really do mean luxury. You've got touchscreen navigation, you've got a full dual-zone climate control system, complete with heated and air-conditioned seats for both the driver and passenger. Now, as far as the ride goes, the seats are actually very nice and plush. The leather is a little bit firm in this case because it's a little bit new, but if you consider almost 491 miles on this particular unit brand new, well, it has aged maybe about that much. But even so, the steering wheel's very nice to the touch. The steering is actually quite fluid, actually, for such a big pickup. When stationary, the steering feels almost spring-loaded because you've got all the heavy-duty suspension and things underneath that sort of restrict your steering a little bit. But once you get the truck going, it's actually not so bad. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Super Duty series pickups and all heavy-duty pickups are always known for either being a diesel engine or having a crap-load of torque. And at many times, it's both. Now, the torque in this truck actually kicks in at 1,000 RPM, or just a little bit higher. So, you get a lot of low-end torque for low-speed towing. But even so, if you were to plant your right foot in it, and I really don't want to do it because I actually tried a test drive of one of these trucks a long time ago, and I had something sitting in the back, and it basically took the load that I had, which was in right on the floor, and shoved it all the way to the back of the seat, all the way underneath all the electronics and stuff. So it has plenty of power. And anything you can't pass with one of these probably has rocket boosters on it. Figuratively speaking, of course. Now, one thing that many heavy-duty truckers will absolutely love about this compared to a few other types of pickups is a fully boxed frame. A couple of pickups, of which I will not name, suffer from essentially what we call as bed bounce. Now, bed bounce is when the truck hits bumps like we're hitting right now, and essentially the back bed is flopping around all over the place. Now, that can be dangerous in a multitude of situations. Number one, if your bed's flopping around, even if it's empty, you could have severe metal stress on the overall frame of the truck. And that's why they boxed the frame in the beginning. Now, also, the fact of the matter is, if you had a load back there, and in this case, it probably would be a very hefty load, chances are it would either end up on the side of the road, or you'd end up taking it home in a million pieces. Now, having driven many of these trucks personally, I can tell you that that problem is pretty much nigh on impossible. The bed is very secure, it doesn't rattle around, and you even get an optional thing called the trailer step, which is essentially a piece of molding that looks like it's pretty much one solid plastic mold, except in the center, you simply lift out, and there's an actual stair that folds out of the back bed. And you also have a pole that's locked into the actual tailgate itself, and that folds out to provide a little more stability for getting into the rear and obtaining whatever you may have in the back. Now, all Super Duties, with the exception of only a couple, are mainly crew cab and super cab style trucks. The super cab, or it's actually called the super cab, as I stand corrected, is essentially a 4-door pickup with space for 5. And what's funny about the Super Duty is the fact that beforehand, many of Ford's pickups, and many people will probably agree with me on this, actually felt somewhat cheap in a sense, because everything felt so big and bulky and it clacked around a lot and parts came off and this, that, and the other. But in the 2011 and even the 2012s that haven't really been updated, things are a lot more nice and they feel a lot more quality. They feel of better quality, as properly speaking. Now, I'm not going to floor it as I normally do in this portion of our test drive, but let's see if we can just give it a little more throttle than we have been and see what kind of power this thing's got. Oh yeah, she's got some power. Now, one thing that I failed to mention, now just looking down at our little multi-information display here in the center, is that the EPA ratings for diesel trucks do not exist, or heavy-duty pickups, to be politically correct. Now, in most tests, it's been found that big diesel pickups like this F250 have been known to get anywhere between 21 to about 23 miles to the gallon when empty. When fully loaded, that may diminish. Now, when you think about it, 21 miles per gallon in a truck with as large an engine as it has, and the fact that it weighs 7,000 plus pounds, you gotta admit that's pretty darn good. And that's what diesel engines have always been known for, is also fuel economy. But then again, those diesel engines that we're talking about right then are usually in compact cars or something like that, and they get 1,000,000 miles to the gallon, or correctly speaking, about 70 to 80 miles to the gallon. So what exactly are you getting for your money here that if you decide to buy one of these Super Duty pickups? Well, like I said, you get a crap load of torque. You certainly get all the luxury amenities if you buy something like this King Ranch here, and also the fact that you get the best-selling pickup truck that Ford has ever made, that has been going on for 34 years in a row. Now, I don't know about anyone else thinking this, but that is one of the most impressive selling records I've ever heard of in my life. Now, you want to talk about a load. We've got a big pickup here in front of us, just in front of this other little SUV. It's hauling a giant John Deere tractor, and I guarantee you that this baby can do that same job. Forget a semi. I mean, unless you're hauling a 53-foot container with a bunch of refrigerated materials in it, this can probably do the same job. Now, it was requested on my review channel for me to do an F350, but you quickly realize that those trucks are almost identical. The only thing that the F350 would have that this doesn't have is a set of dualies on the back. Really, that's it. I mean, the F350 and even the F450 have the exact same engine. They're pretty much identical in terms of styling cues and everything like that, so whether you decide to buy an F250 or an F350, you're really getting almost exactly the same truck either way. So now, speaking of money, in a sense, what are you going to have to shell out to buy one of these trucks? Well, fully loaded, and I can't give exact pricing, but fully loaded F350s like this King Ranch here, probably you'd have to shell out about $70,000 to $72,000 for one of these pickups. Now, why so expensive? Well, generally heavy-duty series pickups are more meant for constructions and things like that. However, if you decide to buy a heavy-duty pickup for whatever your needs may be, more power to you. Figuratively speaking, of course, because, well, you get the idea. So some of the technology that you're now getting with the new F250 and the F350 really is so far ahead of its time. Well, not ahead of its time, but so far ahead of the modern era that we have now. Because you have things like the touchscreen system. You have a trailer brake down here, which if your trailer was to come disconnected, this little notch right here actually is on a slider, and it controls the weight. And should it actually slide all the way over here, you'll get a notice up on the dashboard saying that your trailer has become disconnected. And also down here, this is one question that many people have been asking about the new Super Duty, and even a couple of other F150 style pickups that have this, are these auxiliary switches here. As you can see, you've got 4 of them labeled AUX 1 through 4. Now, you simply flip it up, and you can see that nothing happens. You don't get any suspension raise or anything like that. What these are here for is if you decide to put extra lighting on the outside of the vehicle or something like that, or an exterior outlet, these are here so you don't have to buy an aftermarket switch and pre-wire it and drill holes in your beautiful interior and stuff like that. Now, one other thing I would like to point out, most F-Series pickups pertaining to these Super Duties are always 4-wheel drive. On a very rare occasion, you can find a 2-wheel drive, but it's most likely going to be what's known as the XL trim, which is a 6.2-liter V8, but it's a gas-powered V8, not a diesel. And that 6.2 V8 is pretty much the exact same thing that you can find in the passenger F150s with a little bit less horsepower. Also, a couple of other things that have been fitted to this pickup truck in its heavy-duty status are the hill descent control, being such a big truck, and you also have a diesel exhaust brake. Now, what exactly is that? In this truck, it uses 2 different types of fuels. You have the ordinary diesel fuel that you can put into just about any diesel pickup nowadays, but you also have diesel exhaust fluid. And if you run out of diesel exhaust fluid, well, your truck's basically going to shut down, because diesel exhaust fluid is exactly what makes this truck such a clean running truck, because there's no soot or anything that comes out of the truck. But even so, viewers, sad to say, our test drive of this magnificent Super Duty pickup has now come to an end. I do hope you've enjoyed this test drive of the all-new F250. And if you wish to learn more about this particular pickup, or any of the high-end or low-end F-Series pickups, whichever one you may choose, feel free to visit FordVehicles.com or visit your local Ford dealer and pleasantly be rewarded with multiple points of information and a very, very nice test drive. Until then, viewers, I hope you've enjoyed the drive, and stay tuned to Grand Prix GTPO2's channel for more reports, reviews, and test drives. Until then, have a great day, and I'll see you guys later.